Bear Cub was inside a crashed plane. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The mountains of northern Montana stood silent as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rugged peaks disappeared into low-hanging clouds, and dense forests of pine and spruce covered the landscape like a thick green blanket. In these remote woods, where human contact was rare, nature ruled with quiet authority. Olivia Thorne woke to the sound of her 10-month-old daughter, Aurora, babbling happily in her crib. The small cabin they called home creaked as a morning breeze swept through the valley. Reaching over to the empty space beside her, Olivia sighed. Her husband, Dominic, had left 3 days ago to pick up supplies from the nearest town, a 4-hour drive away. The storm that had rolled in yesterday worried her. The radio reported severe conditions across the mountain passes. "Good morning, my little sunshine," Olivia cooed as she lifted Aurora from her crib. The baby's bright blue eyes sparkled with innocent joy, unaware of her mother's concerns. Aurora's tiny fingers reached for Olivia's face, patting her cheeks with gentle curiosity. After preparing breakfast, Olivia settled on the cabin's front porch with Aurora nestled in her lap. The morning air carried the fresh scent of pine and recent rain. From their elevated position, they could see for miles, a vast expanse of wilderness that both isolated and protected them. Dominic had chosen this spot precisely for its seclusion, wanting to raise their daughter away from the chaos of city life. Now, that isolation felt oppressive. A flock of birds suddenly erupted from the trees about half a mile down the mountain slope. Olivia squinted, trying to see what had disturbed them. Something wasn't right. Through the clearing mist, she spotted what looked like broken trees and disturbed earth. A dark object rested at an unnatural angle among the foliage. Aurora fussed in her arms, as if sensing her mother's sudden tension. Olivia patted her daughter's back absently, her eyes fixed on the distant anomaly. Could it be debris from the storm, or something else entirely? The radio on the kitchen counter crackled with static as Olivia stepped back inside, placing Aurora on her playmat. She turned up the volume, catching fragments of an emergency broadcast. Small aircraft reported missing. Last contact near Blackwater Mountain. Search and rescue operations delayed due to weather conditions. Olivia's heart raced. Blackwater Mountain. That was here, their mountain. She glanced through the window at the disturbance she'd spotted earlier. Cold realization washed over her. That could be the missing plane. Making a quick decision, Olivia packed a small bag with essentials: water, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and some snacks. She couldn't leave Aurora alone, so she secured her daughter in the baby carrier on her chest. Aurora giggled, tugging at her mother's long braid, oblivious to the potential danger they might be walking into. "We need to check, sweetheart," Olivia explained to her daughter as she locked the cabin door behind them. "Someone might need help. Daddy would do the same." The forest floor was slick with morning dew and remnants of yesterday's rainfall. Olivia moved carefully, one hand supporting Aurora in her carrier, the other occasionally grabbing tree trunks for balance as they descended the gentle slope. The sounds of the forest surrounded them. Birds calling, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, and the distant murmur of the creek that ran through the valley. As they drew closer to the disturbed area, the signs of destruction became more evident. Splintered tree trunks pointed at odd angles, their fresh wounds oozing sap. Deep gouges marred the earth, leading toward what Olivia could now clearly identify as the wreckage of a small plane. The aircraft had cut a path through the trees before coming to rest in a small clearing, its nose crumpled against a large boulder. Smoke no longer rose from the wreckage, suggesting the crash wasn't recent. Perhaps it had happened during the height of yesterday's storm when the thunder would have masked the sound of impact. Olivia approached cautiously, her wilderness first aid training from years as a park ranger coming to the forefront of her mind. "Hello," she called out, her voice sounding small against the vastness of the forest. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" Silence answered her. Aurora squirmed in the carrier, making small noises of discomfort at her mother's increasing heart rate. The plane lay on its side, one wing completely sheared off, the other bent at an impossible angle. The cabin door hung open, revealing a glimpse of the interior. Bracing herself for what she might find, Olivia peered inside. The pilot's seat was empty, though dark stains on the leather headrest told a grim story. A quick scan showed no human passengers in the small cabin. Instead, what caught Olivia's eye made her gasp in disbelief. Strapped into one of the passenger seats was a small metal crate, its door bent open from the impact. And from within that damaged crate emerged the unmistakable whimper of a frightened animal. Aurora suddenly went very still in her carrier, her chubby fingers clutching her mother's shirt as she tilted her head toward the sound. Olivia moved closer, careful to watch her footing on the tilted floor of the aircraft. Inside the crate, trembling and covered in dirt, was a small bear cub. Its dark eyes wide with fear, it pressed itself against the back of the cage, making pitiful sounds that twisted Olivia's heart. A wildlife tag was visible on its ear. This was no wild cub, but one being transported, perhaps to a rehabilitation center or zoo. The cub's fur was matted with blood on one side, though Olivia couldn't tell if it was the animal's own or transferred from elsewhere. Its breathing came in rapid, shallow pants, and it flinched when Olivia shifted her weight, causing the metal floor to groan beneath her. "Oh, you poor thing," Olivia whispered. She had experience with wildlife, but never a bear cub, especially not one injured and traumatized from a plane crash. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The cub needed help, but where was its mother? Was this a wild cub being relocated, or an orphaned one being transported to a facility? Aurora chose that moment to let out a delighted squeal, her small hand reaching toward the frightened cub. The sudden sound made the little bear press even further back into its damaged crate. "Shh, Aurora. We need to be quiet," Olivia whispered, gently bouncing her daughter to keep her calm. "The little bear is scared." As Olivia considered her options, a more immediate concern presented itself. From somewhere outside the wreckage came the unmistakable sound of heavy movement through the underbrush. Something large was approaching, drawn perhaps by the scent of the crash site, or by the cries of the frightened cub. Olivia's blood ran cold. If this was a wild cub being relocated, its mother wouldn't be anywhere near. But if it had been captured from these very woods, the realization struck her like lightning. She needed to get Aurora away from here immediately. But as she turned to leave, her foot caught on a piece of twisted metal. She stumbled, regaining her balance quickly, but knocking loose a section of the damaged aircraft. The sound echoed through the quiet forest, followed by a terrifying response, a deep, rumbling growl from just beyond the clearing. Mother bear. It had to be, and Olivia was trapped inside the wreckage with her baby and the bear's cub. Aurora, sensing her mother's fear, began to whimper. The bear cub responded with its own cry, a sound so plaintive and scared that it momentarily distracted Olivia from her panic. She looked at the injured animal, then down at her daughter, and made a decision. Carefully, she unstrapped the bear cub from its damaged crate. The animal was weak enough that it didn't resist, merely trembling in her gentle grasp. Moving with deliberate slowness, Olivia inched toward the aircraft's open door, cradling the cub in one arm while supporting Aurora with the other. The forest had gone eerily silent. Even the birds had ceased their morning songs. Olivia knew what that meant. A predator was near. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the plane. Standing at the edge of the clearing, not 20 feet away, was the largest black bear Olivia had ever seen. Its massive head swung toward her, nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. Dark eyes, intelligent and fierce, locked onto the bundle in her arms, its cub. Olivia's mouth went dry. Aurora, miraculously, remained quiet, her blue eyes wide as she stared at the enormous creature before them. The mother bear rose slightly on her hind legs, a posture that made her appear even more imposing. A warning growl rumbled from deep in her chest. "It's okay," Olivia said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm not going to hurt your baby, see? I'm bringing him to you." With excruciating slowness, she knelt and placed the cub on the ground. The little bear wobbled uncertainly, then let out a small cry. The mother bear dropped to all fours, her attention now fully on her offspring. This was their chance. Olivia began to back away, one careful step at a time, keeping her eyes on the bears but not making direct eye contact, a challenge she knew could provoke an attack. The cub stumbled toward its mother, its movements awkward and pained. Something was wrong. The mother bear nudged the cub gently, but the little one collapsed, unable to stand. Olivia paused. The cub needed help that the mother bear, for all her protective instinct, couldn't provide. But if she left now, the injured cub might not survive. As if understanding her dilemma, Aurora reached out toward the bears, making a soft cooing sound. The mother bear's head snapped up, her gaze moving between Olivia, Aurora, and her injured cub. The tension in the clearing was palpable. What happened next would change Olivia's understanding of the natural world forever. The mother bear lowered her massive body to the ground beside her cub, a gesture of vulnerability that stunned Olivia. The enormous creature gently nudged her offspring with her snout, making soft grunting sounds that seemed almost like whimpers. The cub responded weakly, its small paw reaching toward its mother, but lacking the strength to move much more. "She knows," Olivia whispered to herself. "She knows her baby is hurt badly." Aurora, still secured to Olivia's chest, reached her tiny hands toward the bears, making gentle babbling sounds. Normally, Olivia would have been terrified by her daughter's interest in such dangerous wild animals. But something about this moment felt different, sacred almost. The mother bear's dark eyes shifted from her cub to Aurora, then to Olivia. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something else Olivia couldn't quite name. Desperation, perhaps. An understanding passed between woman and bear, a primal communication that transcended species. "She wants me to help," Olivia realized. The thought both absurd and somehow deeply true. Years of wildlife training told her this was impossible, that she was anthropomorphizing, projecting human emotions onto a wild animal. But her instincts told her something else entirely. The bear rose to her feet and took several steps back, maintaining eye contact with Olivia. Then, in a gesture that defied everything Olivia thought she knew about wild bears, the mother sat down, creating distance between herself and her cub, giving Olivia space to approach. "This is crazy," Olivia murmured, but found herself moving forward nonetheless. Aurora remained unusually calm, her blue eyes fixed on the injured cub as if she understood the gravity of the situation. Kneeling beside the injured cub, Olivia could now see the extent of its injuries. A deep gash ran along its right flank, and one of its hind legs bent at an unnatural angle. The cub's breathing was labored, its small chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow movements. From her pack, Olivia withdrew the first aid kit. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to touch the wild animal. The mother bear watched from her position several yards away, her massive body tense but restrained. "I'm going to help your baby," Olivia said aloud, her voice soft and steady. "I promise I'll be gentle." As she reached toward the cub, a twig snapped somewhere in the forest behind her. The mother bear's head jerked up, her attention diverted by the sudden sound. Olivia froze, her heart pounding as she realized how precarious her position was. Kneeling on the ground, her back to the forest, with Aurora strapped to her chest and a vulnerable bear cub at her fingertips. The mother bear rose to her full height, her focus now on something beyond Olivia's field of vision. A low, rumbling growl emerged from the bear's throat, a warning. But the warning wasn't directed at Olivia. Slowly, carefully, Olivia turned her head to look over her shoulder. At the edge of the clearing stood a man dressed in dark green, a rifle balanced in his hands. The barrel was pointed directly at the mother bear. "Don't move, ma'am," the man said, his voice tense but controlled. "I'm with Montana Fish and Wildlife. That sow is dangerous." "No," Olivia called out, placing herself between the rifle and the bear. "She's not attacking. She's letting me help her cub." The wildlife officer's expression twisted in disbelief. "Ma'am, you're not thinking clearly. You have a baby with you. That bear could kill you both in seconds." "She won't," Olivia insisted, though doubt crept into her mind. Was she risking Aurora's life based on some delusional belief that she could communicate with a wild bear? She's had multiple opportunities to attack, but she hasn't. She knows her cub needs help. The officer took a cautious step forward, his rifle still raised. That cub was being transported to a wildlife sanctuary after being rehabilitated. The plane went down in the storm yesterday. We've been searching since dawn. Pieces fell into place in Olivia's mind. So, this isn't her cub? They're not related? The officer shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. That cub was orphaned last spring. Its mother was killed by poachers about 100 miles from here." A cold wave of realization washed over Olivia. If this wasn't the mother bear's cub, then why was she showing such concern? Why hadn't she attacked? The silence that followed was broken by a soft sound, not from the bears, but from Aurora. The baby girl had begun singing, in her own wordless way, a melody that Olivia recognized as the lullaby she sang to her daughter each night. The sweet, innocent sound carried clearly in the tense silence of the clearing. The mother bear's posture changed, her aggressive stance softening as she turned back toward the sound. Her eyes fixed on Aurora with what seemed impossible to describe as anything other than recognition. "I don't understand," Olivia whispered. The wildlife officer had lowered his rifle slightly, clearly bewildered by the scene before him. "Neither do I. That's not normal bear behavior." Aurora continued her baby song, her small body swaying slightly in the carrier. The mother bear moved closer, ignoring the officer's renewed tension. She approached Olivia and Aurora with careful steps, her head lowered in a non-threatening posture. "Stay absolutely still," the officer warned, raising his rifle again. But Olivia wasn't afraid. Something extraordinary was happening. Something beyond her understanding, but somehow deeply familiar to her soul. The mother bear stopped just feet away, her massive head level with Aurora. The baby reached out, fearless in her innocence, and the bear closed her eyes as if savoring the child's scent. "Look at her ear," the officer said suddenly, his voice hushed with dawning comprehension. "She's tagged." Sure enough, a small metal tag glinted on the mother bear's ear, similar to the one on the cub, but older, worn by years in the wild. "Check the cub's tag number," the officer instructed. "BW329, what does it say?" Olivia gently turned the metal tag on the injured cub's ear. "BW329, she confirmed. "And the sow's tag would be BW143, the officer said, lowering his rifle completely now. "I don't believe it. They're mother and child." "But you said—" "I know what I said," the officer interrupted, his voice filled with wonder. "The mother was shot by poachers last year. We found blood, but no body. We presumed she was dead when we found the cub alone in their den a week later. It's been in rehabilitation ever since." "She survived," Olivia breathed, looking at the massive bear with new understanding. "And somehow, she knew her baby was here. She found her child." The mother bear, no longer just a wild animal in Olivia's mind, but a parent driven by the same fierce love she felt for Aurora, turned her attention back to her injured cub. She made a soft huffing sound, nudging the little one gently. "The cub needs medical attention," the officer said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder and approaching cautiously. "There's a veterinarian with our search team. I can radio for assistance." Olivia nodded, but her focus remained on the bears. "Will they take her back to the sanctuary too? The mother?" The officer sighed, removing his radio from his belt. "It's complicated. She's been wild for over a year since we presumed her dead. Reintroducing her to captivity could be traumatic." "But separating them again would be cruel," Olivia argued. "After everything they've been through to find each other." Before the officer could respond, a new sound reached them. The rhythmic thump of helicopter blades cutting through the air. The search and rescue team had found them. The mother bear's head shot up, her body tensing at the unfamiliar noise. The peaceful connection of moments before threatened to shatter as primal fear overtook the animal's demeanor. "She'll run," the officer predicted, reaching for his rifle again, "and we might not get another chance to help the cub." In that crucial moment, Aurora did something that left both adults speechless. Wriggling in her carrier, the 10-month-old extended her small hand and let out a string of babbles that somehow mimicked the mother bear's earlier rumbling sounds. The bear froze, her attention captured by the tiny human's attempt at communication. Olivia, acting on pure maternal instinct, unstrapped Aurora from the carrier and sat her daughter on the ground before her. The officer made a strangled sound of protest, but didn't intervene. Aurora, balanced on her chubby legs with Olivia's hands supporting her, took one wobbling step toward the mother bear, then another. The massive animal lowered her head, bringing her eyes level with the human child. For a breathless moment, predator and prey, wild and civilized, ancient and new, regarded each other with simple curiosity. Aurora reached out a tiny hand and touched the bear's snout. The helicopter's sound grew louder, cresting the tree line now. The moment would soon be broken by the arrival of more humans, more weapons, more complications. But for this suspended heartbeat of time, something miraculous was happening in the clearing beside the crashed plane. The mother bear allowed Aurora's touch, then gently, with a delicacy that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature, nudged the baby backward toward Olivia. It was a gesture that needed no translation. "Take care of your cub, as I must care for mine." As the helicopter appeared overhead, the officer radioed frantically to the team, explaining the extraordinary situation below. Olivia gathered Aurora back into her arms, tears streaming down her face at the profound exchange she had witnessed. The mother bear returned to her injured cub's side, standing over it protectively as the wind from the helicopter's blades bent the surrounding trees. Her message was clear. I will not leave my child again. When the veterinarian and wildlife team descended from the helicopter 20 minutes later, they approached with tranquilizer guns rather than rifles, guided by the officer's incredible report. The mother bear was sedated humanely, falling into a heavy sleep beside her cub. Both animals were loaded carefully onto stretchers and lifted into the helicopter. They'll be taken to the Bear Conservation Center in Missoula, the team leader explained to Olivia as they prepared to depart. It's unprecedented, but we're going to try to keep them together. Your actions today may have changed our understanding of bear cognition and emotion. Olivia nodded, cradling Aurora close as they watched the helicopter rise above the trees, bearing its precious cargo of mother and child. She crossed miles of wilderness, somehow knowing her baby would be here, she said softly. What wouldn't a mother do for her child? As the sound of the helicopter faded, Olivia turned to make the climb back to her cabin. The forest seemed different now, still wild and potentially dangerous, but somehow more connected to her own experience. Aurora babbled happily in her arms, already forgetting the extraordinary encounter as children do. They were halfway up the mountain when Olivia heard a vehicle approaching on the rarely used access road that led to their cabin. Her heart leapt. Dominic must have finally made it through the mountain passes with their supplies. But as they emerged from the tree line, Olivia saw not her husband's familiar truck, but a sheriff's department vehicle parked in front of their cabin. A uniformed officer stood on their porch, his expression grave. Cold dread pooled in Olivia's stomach. There was only one reason the sheriff would drive all the way up to their remote home. Aurora sensed her mother's sudden tension and began to fuss, her small face crumpling with the beginnings of tears. Olivia held her daughter closer, whispering words of comfort that she herself didn't believe as she approached the waiting officer. Mrs. Thorne? The sheriff asked, removing his hat as she climbed the porch steps. Yes, Olivia managed, her voice barely audible. It's my husband, isn't it? The sheriff nodded solemnly. There was an accident on Sawmill Pass last night. The storm washed out part of the road. His truck was found at the bottom of the ravine early this morning. Olivia's legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps, clutching Aurora to her chest. The baby began to wail, as if understanding that their world had just shattered. No survivors? Olivia asked, already knowing the answer. I'm very sorry, ma'am. The search and rescue team is recovering him now. The road conditions were just too treacherous. The morning's events, the crashed plane, the bear cub, the miraculous connection between mother and child separated by tragedy, took on a terrible new significance. While Olivia had been witnessing that reunion, her own husband had been lying dead at the bottom of a mountain ravine. Is there someone I can call for you? The sheriff asked gently. Family who could come stay with you and the little one. Olivia shook her head numbly. They had chosen this isolated life together, far from their families. Dominic's parents were deceased, and her own family was scattered across the country, distant in more ways than just miles. We have each other, she whispered to Aurora, whose cries had softened to hiccuping sobs. Just like that mama bear and her cub. We have each other. The sheriff left after helping Olivia inside and making sure she had what she needed for the immediate future. He promised to return the next day with more information and to discuss arrangements. Olivia thanked him mechanically, her mind still unable to process the devastating news. That night, as a gentle rain pattered against the cabin roof, Olivia sat in the rocking chair by the window, Aurora sleeping fitfully in her arms. The events of the day swirled in her mind, miraculous and tragic, connected by threads of motherhood, loss, and survival. Dominic should have seen it, she whispered to the darkness, tears sliding down her cheeks. He would have understood what it meant. Her husband had loved this wilderness and had taught Olivia to love it too. He'd respected its dangers and cherished its beauty. The isolation that now felt so oppressive had been their shared dream. A simple life where they could raise their daughter surrounded by nature's wonders. Now that dream felt hollow, a half-finished story without its co-author. Aurora stirred in her sleep, her tiny fingers curling around a lock of Olivia's hair. The simple gesture unleashed a fresh wave of grief. How would she raise this child alone in the wilderness? How could she bear the solitude without Dominic's warm presence beside her? As the night deepened, Olivia's thoughts returned to the mother bear. Separated from her cub, presumed dead, she had nonetheless survived. Not only survived, but somehow found her way across miles of wilderness, driven by an instinct so powerful it defied explanation. "If she could do it, so can I," Olivia murmured, pressing a kiss to Aurora's forehead. "For you, my little one, for you." Dawn brought a new challenge. As Olivia changed Aurora's diaper and prepared her morning bottle, a series of sharp knocks sounded at the cabin door. Too forceful to be the sheriff returning, too deliberate to be a friendly visitor. Balancing Aurora on her hip, Olivia opened the door to find 3 men standing on her porch. Their expressions ranged from solemn to outright hostile. "Mrs. Thorne," the oldest of the 3 asked, his voice gruff. "I'm Frank Mercer. This is my son Calvin and my brother Paul. We're from the hunting lodge down in the valley." Olivia nodded warily. She knew of the Mercers by reputation, a family that had run guided hunts in these mountains for generations, not always with strict adherence to hunting regulations. "I'm sorry for your loss," Frank continued, though his tone suggested this was merely obligatory. Dom was well respected around these parts. "Thank you," Olivia replied, shifting Aurora to her other hip. The baby watched the strangers with curious eyes. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Frank cleared his throat, exchanging glances with the other men. "Well, ma'am, we heard about what happened yesterday with the bear and all." Olivia tensed. News traveled fast in small communities, but this seemed unusually quick. The wildlife officers took them both to a conservation center. The cub was injured in the plane crash. "That's the problem right there," Calvin interjected, stepping forward with barely concealed anger. "That bear's killed 3 of our hunting dogs over the past year, charged at my cousin Roy last fall. She's a menace." "She was protecting her territory," Olivia countered, her voice hardening. "And yesterday she was trying to reach her cub." Paul Mercer spat over the porch railing. Wildlife officers had no business taking that bear to some cushy rehab center. Should have put her down on the spot. "The bear showed no aggression toward me or my daughter," Olivia said firmly. "She's not the menace here." Frank's expression darkened. "Listen, Mrs. Thorne, we respect that you're grieving, but you need to understand how things work in these mountains. Predators like that can't be allowed to get comfortable around humans. Yesterday might have turned out very different." "It turned out exactly as it should have," Olivia replied, her grief temporarily displaced by a surge of protectiveness, not just for Aurora, but for the bears as well. "That mother found her baby against impossible odds. She deserves our respect, not a death sentence." Calvin stepped closer, his face flushing with anger. "Respect? It's a goddamn bear. My family's livelihood depends on hunters feeling safe in these woods. Word gets out that there's a man-killer on the loose." "She's not a man-killer," Olivia interrupted sharply. And if your hunting dogs were where they shouldn't have been, that's hardly the bear's fault. Frank put a restraining hand on his son's arm. Mrs. Thorne, we didn't come here to argue. We came to let you know that we've filed a formal complaint with the Wildlife Department. That bear needs to be destroyed, not coddled. Olivia's mind raced. She knew how these things often went in rural communities. Local interests frequently won out over conservation efforts, especially when livelihoods were at stake. I'll be filing my own report, she said evenly. As a witness to the bear's behavior and as a former park ranger with wildlife experience. Before any decisions are made, all perspectives should be considered. The men exchanged looks that made it clear they hadn't expected resistance. Frank nodded curtly. Like I said, we're sorry about Dom. He was a good man, even if we didn't always see eye to eye on wildlife management. Dominic believed in respecting nature, not controlling it, Olivia stated, unconsciously standing taller. I share that belief. As the men turned to leave, Calvin paused at the bottom of the steps. You might want to reconsider staying up here all alone, Mrs. Thorne. These mountains can be dangerous for a woman and a baby. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between them. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I'm well aware of the mountain's dangers, Mr. Mercer, and their wonders. We're not going anywhere. After the men departed, Olivia closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Aurora reached up to pat her mother's cheek, seemingly sensing her distress. It's okay, sunshine, Olivia whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. In the span of 24 hours, she had lost her husband, witnessed something miraculous, and made powerful enemies. The safe, isolated life they had built suddenly felt precarious. But as she looked into her daughter's trusting eyes, Olivia felt a resolve hardening within her. The mother bear had fought to find her cub against all odds and reason. Olivia would fight just as fiercely to protect what mattered to her. Aurora, this home they had made, and yes, even those bears who had somehow connected with her on a level beyond words. The sheriff's vehicle rumbled up the drive around noon, bringing with it the grim business of death. Paperwork, arrangements, decisions that seemed impossible to make through the fog of grief. Olivia moved through these tasks mechanically, Aurora napping in her crib during the difficult conversations. The Mercers came by this morning, Olivia mentioned as the sheriff prepared to leave. They seemed upset about the bear. Sheriff Davies sighed, adjusting his hat. Frank's been pushing for more aggressive predator control for years, claims it's affecting his guide business. The bear didn't threaten us, Olivia insisted. I need you to make sure that's in the official report. The sheriff gave her a long look. Olivia, I've known the Mercers my whole life. They're powerful in this county. Don't make enemies you don't need, especially now. I'm not making enemies, Olivia replied. I'm standing up for what's right. That mother bear deserves a chance to be with her cub. Dominic would have said the same. Sheriff Davies nodded slowly. Yes, he would have. He was stubborn that way too. He paused at the door. The wildlife officer, Peterson, told me what happened with your little girl and the bear, said he'd never seen anything like it. It was? Olivia struggled to find words that wouldn't sound fanciful or delusional. It was a connection. I can't explain it better than that. Just be careful, Olivia. With the bears, with the Mercers, with all of it. That little girl needs you. After the sheriff left, Olivia fed Aurora and settled her for another nap. The cabin felt suffocating, the walls closing in with memories of Dominic. She needed air, space to think. Bundling Aurora into her carrier, Olivia stepped outside. The afternoon sun broke through scattered clouds, illuminating the mountainside in patches of golden light. Without consciously deciding, she found herself walking the path down to where the plane had crashed. The wreckage remained, though the bears and wildlife officers were long gone. Yellow tape marked the area as an investigation site. Olivia stood at the edge of the clearing, remembering the extraordinary scene that had unfolded there just hours earlier. She wasn't sure what she had expected to find. Some physical evidence of the miraculous connection she had witnessed, perhaps. But there was only trampled grass, tire tracks from the wildlife officers' vehicles, and the broken plane nestled among the trees like a wounded bird. As she turned to head back to the cabin, something caught her eye. A small metal object glinting in the grass near where the mother bear had stood. Shifting Aurora's weight, Olivia bent to pick it up. It was the mother bear's ear tag, somehow broken off during the commotion of the rescue. BW143, just as the wildlife officer had said. Olivia closed her fingers around it, the metal warm from the sun. "Mrs. Thorne?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped the tag. Spinning around, she found Calvin Mercer standing at the edge of the clearing, a rifle slung over his shoulder. He wasn't wearing hunting clothes, just regular work attire, which somehow made his presence more unsettling. "Mr. Mercer," Olivia acknowledged, instinctively placing a protective hand over Aurora's back. "What are you doing here?" "Checking the plane for salvage," he said, though his eyes were fixed on her rather than the wreckage. "Dad sent me to see if there was anything worth recovering before the NTSB takes it all away." Olivia doubted this explanation, but didn't challenge it. "I was just leaving." Calvin took a step closer. "What do you have there?" Olivia's hand tightened around the bear tag. Nothing important. "Looks like a wildlife tag to me," Calvin persisted, his tone hardening. "Those are federal property, you know. Taking one could be considered tampering with evidence. I was going to turn it in to Officer Peterson," Olivia lied smoothly. "It must have fallen off during the evacuation." Calvin held out his hand. "I'll make sure it gets to the right people." Olivia hesitated, reluctant to surrender this small connection to the extraordinary event she had witnessed. But with Aurora strapped to her chest and Calvin armed, this wasn't the time for confrontation. She placed the tag in his palm, noting the satisfied smirk that briefly crossed his face. Whatever game the Mercers were playing, this small piece of metal was somehow important to them. "You really should consider moving back to town," Calvin said, pocketing the tag. "These mountains are no place for a woman alone. All sorts of dangerous things happen up here." "Is that a threat, Mr. Mercer?" Calvin shrugged, his expression innocent but his eyes cold. "Just friendly advice. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you and that beautiful baby girl." "We'll be fine," Olivia said firmly, stepping around him. "Have a good day." As she walked back up the trail to her cabin, Olivia could feel Calvin's eyes following her. The peaceful sanctuary that these mountains had once represented now felt tainted by his presence, by the unspoken threat in his words. Why was he so interested in the bear tag? And why were the Mercers so determined to see the mother bear destroyed? It seemed excessive, even for hunters concerned about predators. That night, after putting Aurora to bed, Olivia sat at Dominic's desk and opened his laptop. The satellite internet connection was slow but functional. She navigated to the Montana Fish and Wildlife Service website and searched for information about bear tagging programs. What she found was straightforward enough. Bears were tagged for research, monitoring, and management purposes. Tags included information about the bear's age, sex, health status, and where it had been captured or relocated. But as she scrolled through the information, something nagged at her. Officer Peterson had immediately recognized the significance of the mother bear's tag number. He had known, without checking a database, that BW143 was the mother of BW329. On impulse, Olivia opened a new tab and searched for news about bear poaching in Montana over the past year. Several stories appeared, a persistent problem in the region, with black bear gallbladders fetching high prices in certain markets for use in traditional medicine. One article caught her attention. Poaching ring suspected in series of bear killings. It detailed how wildlife authorities had found several bear carcasses with gallbladders and paws removed, suggesting organized poaching rather than opportunistic hunting. Olivia's pulse quickened as she read further. The most recent case involved a female black bear presumed killed, though only blood evidence was found. Her cub was later rescued and placed in a wildlife rehabilitation program. The mother was shot by poachers last year, Officer Peterson had said. We found blood, but no body. Could there be a connection between the Mercers' unusual interest in this particular bear and the poaching incidents? They were hunters, yes, but legitimate hunting businesses typically distance themselves from poaching operations, which damaged the reputation of legal hunting. Yet Calvin had been very interested in that ear tag, evidence that could potentially link back to poaching activities if the bear had been previously documented by wildlife officials. Olivia dug deeper, searching for any mentions of the Mercer family in connection with wildlife violations. Nothing obvious appeared, but she did find an article about declining hunting tourism in the region, with a quote from Frank Mercer lamenting increased regulations and predator protection programs cutting into his business. A sudden cry from Aurora's room pulled Olivia away from her research. She closed the laptop and hurried to comfort her daughter, pushing aside the troubling connections forming in her mind. For now, Aurora needed her undivided attention. As she rocked her daughter back to sleep, Olivia gazed out the window at the moonlit forest. Somewhere, miles away, a mother bear and her cub were hopefully reunited in a conservation facility, their future uncertain. Here, in this cabin, another mother and child faced their own uncertain path forward. "We'll figure it out," Olivia whispered, stroking Aurora's soft curls. "Somehow, we'll find our way through this wilderness." She couldn't have known then how literally those words would soon be tested. Morning brought a knock at the door, more hesitant than the Mercers' aggressive pounding, but still unexpected. Olivia opened it to find Officer Peterson standing on her porch, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Thorne," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Olivia replied, stepping back to invite him in. Aurora was playing on a blanket in the living room, surrounded by her toys. "What can I do for you?" Peterson removed his hat, twisting it in his hands. "I wanted to express my condolences about your husband. Sheriff Davies told me when I checked in this morning." "Thank you," Olivia said automatically, the words already feeling worn with repetition. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." As Olivia prepared the coffee, Peterson knelt beside Aurora, smiling as the baby offered him a colorful plastic ring. The wildlife officer made a game of it, pretending to examine the toy with exaggerated seriousness before handing it back. "She's taken quite an interest in wildlife," Olivia commented, setting mugs on the table. "After yesterday's experience." Peterson joined her, his expression growing serious. "That's actually part of why I'm here. Something's happened that I thought you should know about." Cold apprehension settled in Olivia's stomach. "The bears?" Peterson nodded grimly. "When we arrived at the conservation center, the mother bear was still sedated. Standard procedure is to perform a full examination before placing the animal in a rehabilitation enclosure. During that exam, the veterinarian found something unusual. What? Olivia leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. The bear had an old bullet wound, partially healed, consistent with the injury we believed killed her a year ago. But more concerning was what we found embedded in the tissue around that wound. Peterson reached into his pocket and withdrew a small evidence bag. Inside was what appeared to be a metal fragment, no bigger than a fingernail. A bullet fragment? Olivia guessed. Yes, but not just any bullet. Peterson's voice lowered. It's from a very specific type of ammunition, one that's not commonly used for hunting. It's more typically associated with poaching, Olivia finished, the pieces clicking into place. That's why you recognized the tag numbers so quickly yesterday. You were investigating the poaching case when the mother bear was shot. Peterson looked surprised at her insight. Yes, BW143 was part of our tracking study on bear movements in the region. When she disappeared and we found blood at her den, I was the one who recovered her cub. I've been working the poaching case ever since. And now you have evidence, Olivia said, gesturing to the bullet fragment. Potentially, yes, but this is where things get complicated. Peterson sighed, running a hand through his short hair. Last night, someone broke into the conservation center. They tranquilized the security guard and tried to access the veterinary facility where both bears are being held. Olivia's blood ran cold. Were they hurt? No, thankfully. An alarm was triggered and the intruders fled, but they left behind equipment, tranquilizer guns and a set of surgical tools. They were going to remove the bullet fragment, Olivia realized. Destroy the evidence. Peterson nodded grimly. That's our working theory. This morning, the Conservation Center received a formal request to euthanize the mother bear, citing her as a danger to humans based on previous aggressive encounters with hunters. The Mercers, Olivia said, the name coming out like a curse. They came here yesterday, demanding the same thing. Peterson's eyebrows shot up. Frank Mercer's signature was on the request, along with several other local hunting outfitters. But I didn't know they'd approached you directly. Olivia briefly recounted the confrontation with the Mercers, as well as her later encounter with Calvin at the crash site. Peterson listened intently, his expression darkening. Calvin was particularly interested in the ear tag, Olivia concluded. Now I understand why. It links the bear to the poaching investigation. This is becoming more dangerous than I anticipated, Peterson said, his voice low with concern. If the Mercers are indeed involved in the poaching ring we've been tracking, they won't want any witnesses connecting them to that bear. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Olivia glanced at Aurora, happily oblivious as she stacked and knocked over plastic blocks. What happens now? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Peterson looked troubled. Officially, I've been removed from the case due to emotional involvement. My supervisors think I'm too invested in the bear's welfare to remain objective. Unofficially, ... He leaned closer. I believe the Mercers have influence with certain officials. The request to euthanize the mother bear is likely to be approved within days. That's not right, Olivia protested. She's evidence in a criminal investigation, not to mention an intelligent creature who's already suffered enough. I agree, which is why I've made arrangements to have both bears transferred to a federal wildlife refuge in Idaho. It's a secure facility outside of local jurisdiction. Peterson lowered his voice further. The transfer is scheduled for tomorrow night. Until then, I've personally paid for additional security at the Conservation Center. Olivia felt a wave of gratitude toward this man who was clearly risking his career to protect these animals. "Thank you for telling me. But why come all the way up here to share this information?" Peterson's expression grew grave. "Because I'm concerned for your safety, Mrs. Thorne. You and your daughter witnessed something extraordinary yesterday, something that connects deeply to this case. If the Mercers are involved in poaching, they might see you as a threat, especially after Calvin saw you with that ear tag." Olivia's mind raced, calculating the danger they faced. "What should we do?" "I can arrange for a safe house in town until this is resolved," Peterson offered. "Just until we can secure the evidence and make arrests if necessary." The thought of leaving their home, the home she and Dominic had built together, felt like another loss piled onto an already unbearable burden. But Aurora's safety had to come first. "I'll need some time to pack essentials," Olivia said, glancing at the family photos lining the walls. "When would we leave?" "I can return this evening," Peterson replied, standing to leave. "Try not to make it obvious you're preparing to depart. And Mrs. Thorne, don't discuss this with anyone." After Peterson left, Olivia moved through the cabin in a daze, selecting clothes, supplies, and mementos to take with them. Aurora napped peacefully, unaware of the dangers swirling around them. Outside, dark clouds gathered over the mountains, promising another storm. As evening approached, Olivia had everything packed in 2 duffel bags. She sat by the window, watching the road for Peterson's return while Aurora played on the floor beside her. The promised storm had arrived, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Headlights appeared through the trees, cutting through the gathering darkness. Olivia grabbed Aurora and the bags, relief washing over her. But as the vehicle drew closer, her heart sank. It wasn't Peterson's wildlife service truck. It was Frank Mercer's distinctive red pickup, followed by 2 other vehicles. "No, no, no," Olivia whispered, backing away from the window. She needed to call Peterson, tell him the Mercers were here, but the satellite phone was in the kitchen. Before she could reach it, the cabin door burst open. Calvin Mercer stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hunting jacket. Frank and 3 other men filed in behind him. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Thorne?" Calvin asked, eyeing the packed bags. Olivia clutched Aurora tighter. "My father's ill. We're going to visit him for a few days." Frank Mercer stepped forward, his expression unconvinced. "Peterson was here earlier. What did he tell you?" "He expressed his condolences about Dominic," Olivia replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Nothing more." "You're lying," Calvin snarled. "Dad, she knows about the operation. Peterson must have told her everything." Frank held up a hand to silence his son. "Mrs. Thorne, we don't want trouble, but we've worked too hard building our business to let it be destroyed now." "Your business involves illegal poaching," Olivia said, anger overriding her fear. "You shot that mother bear and left her for dead. Then you tried to destroy the evidence when she miraculously survived." A tense silence followed her accusation. Aurora, sensing the hostility, began to whimper. "We've got a problem, Frank," one of the other men muttered. "Peterson will be looking for her if she doesn't show in town." Frank nodded grimly. There was a second landslide on Sawmill Pass tonight. Very tragic. Mother and daughter trying to leave their cabin after the husband's accident, caught in nature's fury. The cold calculation in his voice sent chills down Olivia's spine. These men had come to kill them and stage it as an accident, just as they'd likely done with other problems before. "You won't get away with this," Olivia said, backing toward the rear door with Aurora. "Peterson knows as I'm a witness. Peterson's been suspended," Calvin said with a smirk. Seems he got too emotionally invested in a bear. By the time anyone connects the dots, there'll be nothing to find. Frank took a step toward them. "Give us the child, Olivia. We'll make it quick for you, and we'll make sure she's taken care of." "Never," Olivia hissed, reaching behind her for the door handle. With a sudden movement, she pushed it open and ran into the storm. Aurora clutched tightly against her chest. The men shouted behind her, boots pounding on the wooden porch. Olivia ran blindly through the rain toward the forest, where the dense trees might provide some cover. The mountain terrain she knew so well had become a labyrinth in the darkness, paths turned to muddy streams by the downpour. A gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet splintering bark inches from her head. Olivia ducked lower, veering deeper into the woods. Aurora was crying now, her wails nearly lost in the storm's fury. "I've got you," Olivia gasped, stumbling over roots and rocks. "Mommy's got you." She had no plan beyond immediate escape. The nearest neighbor was miles away. The road was blocked by the Mercers' vehicles. Her only hope was to hide until Peterson realized something was wrong and came looking for them. The forest grew thicker, the undergrowth tearing at her clothes as she pushed through. Behind her, flashlight beams cut through the darkness, accompanied by men's voices calling to each other as they spread out to search. Olivia's foot caught on a fallen branch, sending her tumbling down a small embankment. She curled her body around Aurora, taking the brunt of the fall on her shoulder and back. Pain radiated through her, but she couldn't afford to stop. Struggling to her feet, Olivia realized they had ended up near the crashed plane site. The clearing was visible through the trees, illuminated by occasional lightning flashes. An idea formed in her desperate mind. The plane's wreckage might provide temporary shelter from the rain and a hiding place the Mercers wouldn't immediately check. Clutching Aurora closer, Olivia made her way toward the crash site. The plane lay as they had left it, its broken frame glistening in the rain. Olivia climbed carefully through the damaged doorway, settling in a relatively dry corner of the cabin. Aurora's cries had subsided to whimpers, her little body trembling with cold and fear. "Shh, sunshine," Olivia whispered, wrapping her jacket around them both. "We need to be very quiet now." Outside, the flashlight beams moved through the forest, coming closer to the clearing. Olivia held her breath, praying Aurora would remain silent. The small space where they huddled still carried a faint scent of the bear cub, an earthy, wild smell that stirred something primal in Olivia's memory. Suddenly, Aurora stiffened in her arms. The baby's eyes, wide and alert, fixed on something beyond Olivia's shoulder. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the plane's metal frame. Slowly, heart hammering, Olivia turned her head. In the darkest corner of the wrecked cabin, two eyes reflected the faint light. Eyes she recognized instantly. The mother bear. Impossibly, incredibly, the massive animal had escaped from the conservation center and found her way back to the crash site. She stood on her hind legs now, towering over Olivia and Aurora, her breath visible in the cold night air. Olivia's mind reeled. How? Why? Had Peterson's transfer plan gone wrong? Had the Mercers accidentally released her while attempting to destroy evidence? None of it made sense. And yet here was the bear, her massive presence filling the confined space. "Please," Olivia whispered, tears mingling with rainwater on her cheeks. "We won't hurt you." Aurora, displaying that same inexplicable fearlessness she'd shown the day before, reached toward the bear with a small, curious hand. The bear lowered herself to all fours, approaching slowly. Outside, voices grew closer. Flashlight beams swept across the clearing, illuminating the plane's broken windows. "Check the wreckage," Calvin's voice ordered. They might be hiding there. The mother bear's head swung toward the sound, a deep growl rumbling in her chest. She positioned herself between Olivia and Aurora and the plane's entrance, her massive body blocking them from view. Footsteps splashed through puddles, approaching the wreckage. Olivia held her breath, clutching Aurora tightly. The bear remained perfectly still, a living shield of fur and muscle. Calvin's face appeared at the broken window, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Nothing in here," he called back to the others. "Just that damn bear." "What? The bear from the center?" Frank's voice responded with shock. "How the hell?" "It's standing guard over something in the corner," Calvin replied. "Can't see what." "Shoot it," Frank ordered. "One bullet to the head. We'll say it attacked us while we were searching for Mrs. Thorne." Calvin raised his rifle, aiming through the broken window. Olivia closed her eyes, turning her body to shield Aurora as best she could. The gunshot never came. Instead, a new voice cut through the storm, authoritative, commanding. "Montana Wildlife Service, drop your weapons." Officer Peterson's voice, accompanied by several others. Flashlights and spotlights suddenly illuminated the entire clearing. "What the?" Frank sputtered. "Peterson? I thought you were suspended." "I was," Peterson replied, his voice closer now. "Until the state director received some very interesting footage from the Conservation Center's security cameras. Footage showing you and your associates attempting to destroy evidence in a federal poaching investigation." The bear shifted position, moving deeper into the shadows with Olivia and Aurora. Outside, the confrontation continued. "We have a dangerous predator in that wreckage," Calvin argued. "It could attack at any moment." "That dangerous predator escaped during your break-in," Peterson countered, "and somehow found its way back here, almost as if it was protecting something or someone." More footsteps splashed through the clearing as additional officers arrived. The Mercers and their associates were being disarmed and restrained. "Olivia?" Peterson called out. "Are you in there? It's safe to come out now." The mother bear turned to look at Olivia, their eyes meeting in the darkness. In that moment, Olivia felt again that impossible connection, an understanding that transcended species. The bear moved aside, creating a path to the entrance. "We're here," Olivia called back, her voice breaking with relief. "Aurora and I are both here." Cradling Aurora against her chest, Olivia made her way to the plane's door. Peterson stood just outside, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, his expression transforming from concern to astonishment as he saw who was behind her. "Impossible," he breathed, staring at the mother bear. "She was sedated for transport when the Mercers broke in. There's no way she could have traveled this far, this quickly." The bear followed Olivia to the doorway, but stopped there as if reluctant to leave the shelter of the plane. Aurora reached back toward the animal, making soft cooing sounds. "I think," Olivia said, her voice hushed with wonder, "she came back for us, just like she came for her cub." As wildlife officers secured the Mercers, medical personnel wrapped Olivia and Aurora in warm blankets. Peterson explained how he'd become suspicious when his transport team reported the mother bear missing from the Conservation Center. "We reviewed the security footage and saw the Mercers tampering with her enclosure. When I couldn't reach you by phone, I gathered every available officer and headed here." He shook his head in amazement. "But I never expected to find her here, protecting you both." "What will happen to her now?" Olivia asked, watching as wildlife specialists prepared tranquilizer guns to safely recapture the bear. "The bullet fragment is secure with federal evidence," Peterson assured her. "She and her cub will be transferred to a protected sanctuary where they can live together, away from people like the Mercers. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the storm clouds with gold and pink, Olivia stood with Aurora beside the Wildlife Service truck. Inside a reinforced transport cage, the sedated mother bear lay peacefully, soon to be reunited with her cub. "I still don't understand it," Peterson said, closing his logbook. "Bears don't behave this way. They don't track specific humans for miles to protect them." Olivia looked down at Aurora, who was watching the bear with curious, knowing eyes. Maybe it's not about understanding. Maybe it's about connection. 6 months later, Olivia stood on the observation platform of the Northern Rockies Wildlife Sanctuary, Aurora balanced on her hip. Below them, in a spacious, forested enclosure, the mother bear and her now adolescent cub foraged among berry bushes and fallen logs. "They've adapted well," the sanctuary director said, joining them at the railing. "Usually bears from traumatic situations show stress behaviors, but these two have been remarkably calm, almost as if they know they're safe now." The mother bear looked up suddenly, her keen senses detecting their presence. For a moment, her dark eyes locked with Olivia's. Aurora squealed with delight, waving a small hand. The bear rose onto her hind legs, not in aggression, but in what almost seemed like recognition. The cub, noticing its mother's behavior, looked up as well. "Extraordinary," the director murmured. "She remembers you." "We remember her too," Olivia replied softly. The investigation into the Mercer family had uncovered an extensive poaching operation targeting bears for their gallbladders and paws. Frank and Calvin were facing federal charges, their hunting business dismantled. The evidence from the mother bear's old wound had been crucial to the case. Olivia had sold the remote cabin, unable to bear its isolation after Dominic's death. She and Aurora now lived in a small house at the edge of town, where Officer Peterson, now promoted to regional director, was a frequent visitor and friend. Life would never be what she had planned with Dominic, but it had found a new purpose. Olivia had accepted a position as an educational coordinator with the Wildlife Sanctuary, sharing the remarkable story of the mother bear and her cub with the visitors and school groups. As they prepared to leave the observation platform, Olivia placed Aurora's small hand against the glass separating them from the enclosure. The mother bear approached, pressing her massive paw against the barrier from the other side. "Some connections," Olivia whispered to her daughter, "transcend everything we think we understand about the world." Aurora smiled, somehow comprehending the profound truth in her mother's words. The bear lowered her paw and turned away, returning to her cub with the unhurried grace of a creature finally at peace. Above them, the Montana sky stretched endlessly, a reminder of how small they all were beneath its vastness, humans and animals alike, connected by the invisible threads of compassion, courage, and an ancient understanding that ran deeper than words could express. In that quiet moment, as woman and child watched mother and cub disappear among the trees, the extraordinary became ordinary, and the impossible simply became part of their story. A story of two mothers, two children, and the lengths to which love would go to protect what matters most.